I'm here with Chris Wyatt. He is the CEO of Youtoo, and you guys just saw the clip of what his company is and the product that they're bringing to market. It's kind of interesting to actually be sitting here talking to him because we were both mentioned in a USA Today article recently, but hadn't met each other. So thank you for coming this afternoon.
Thank you, Eric, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of ask you a question about Youtoo and what's been the biggest challenge in bringing this new thing to the market?
Well, certainly launching Youtoo was the biggest challenge. If you think about it, Youtoo is a television network, a cable television network in 15 million households. We launched a social network, mobile apps, and the technology to make it all work together. So naturally, I'm really proud of my team. We've done something that's never been done before, to say the least, and that was the hardest part.
Right. Okay. And so, how long have you guys been working on it? I mean, what would you say sort of has been the life cycle of that?
So, for me personally, this has been a 16-year journey. I left television as a creative showrunner, a network executive producer, and then various iterations. But this team, we've been together for 3 years. We've been a technology company in stealth mode, so no one really knew what we were doing.
Right.
We acquired both of our television networks a little over 3 years ago, and just launched and let the world know precisely what we were doing.
Okay. Well, cool. So when we were doing the research for our project, we looked at kind of how people were using social media and television. And your product has a slightly different twist on that. And I know that one of the first panels was asked to define what social TV means to them and what they think the definition of social TV is. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be interesting to hear your definition of social TV.
It's entirely different. I mean, television has always been social. Whether we watch television with a family or our friends, or if we talk about it around the water cooler. Today social television is something that we called convergence about 10 years ago, and prior to that it was interactive television. So I think social television is really yet to be defined. In our case, what we do is we really differentiate from all other social television companies because we are in the television business, number one. And number two, we're the only service that allows you to be on what we consider to be the number one screen, and that's the TV. Mm-hmm. So we're not antithetical, if you will, to the content. We're not a byproduct of the content. We're actually creating real social television with the viewers on TV. In our first season of Youtoo, we have something called the Fame Spot.
Okay.
And it's a 15-second video. It's a catchy name. It's a 15-second video that you can record on your mobile device through our app or at youtoo.com. And if you upload it, it's automatically filtered, and then you can be on the air within under 3 minutes. So unlike a social network, you can interact with a national television audience, but certainly the content also lives online. So just like Facebook, for example, you can share that content with your friends and family, around the world.
So you said something about this kind of an interesting concept, because I'm trying to figure out if you've got people uploading their own content and you've got this thing called a Fame Spot, are you breaking your content up into different types of categories or seasons? How does that look? Like if I'm going to upload a Fame Spot, let's say, show up in a certain time so I know when to read or comment people's.
Sure, what the content itself is. Owning and operating a cable television network is always fun. And when we acquired so we have a linear channel. And what we decided to do for season 1, which as you saw from the video, Mark Burnett through his company Vimby produced it. What we have is this: we've taken really a collection of the best of the web, and we've created television programs around them. Howcast, KipK, for example, which is a very popular online video website. So we've taken that content and we've created a television show around it. And then what we've also done is we've gone and we've licensed what we thought were perfect examples of television shows that also have an online component or online fan base, like the X-Files, for example.
Yeah.
And in that case, what we've done is Vimby, Mark Burnett's company, brought in Mike Sears, who did the dinner in the movie concept. So if you're familiar with that,
I'm married to a passionate Penny, so yes.
Okay, there you go. So for the viewers who aren't, essentially what happens is they expand a movie, and what they do is they bring in a host and a co-host that talk about the behind the scenes and then show you how to make a meal, right? So it's kind of interactive, if you will. In this case, what we did for the X-Files, we brought in Dean Haglund, who was the lone gunman, is a co-host, and what he does is does a little bit of the same thing, where he talks a little bit about behind the scenes, but the difference is we have what's called a fame spot topic. So it's basically a conversation starter.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. He'll say, in this episode, number 1, Mulder seems to think he sees a UFO. Have you ever seen a UFO? And that fame spot topic is a prompt really for viewers and users to be able to upload their 15 seconds on, do they believe UFOs are real? Have they seen a UFO, for example? So that's how the linear broadcast works.
Okay.
So to answer the second part of your question, what happens is you upload a fame spot, just like any other social network, you have a profile page where you can display all sorts of personal information or hide all that personal information if you want. And of course, when you upload a fame spot, it has to be approved. So it goes through our broadcast standards, and once it's approved, it also appears on your website, on Youtoo.com, on your profile page, and in the general population. So the content really resides on 2 places.
Okay. And so that's interesting. So the way that you're packaging the information puts it together in kind of a way that people know how to kind of get it in bite-sized chunks.
Precisely.
Yeah. And
Precisely.
and so one of the things that we saw in our research was a lot of people like to time shift their content, so they may not want to watch it when it's showing, or maybe, I guess, if it's there 15 seconds of fame, they may want to go back and watch it time and time again. So can you talk to how the product supports time shifters?
Sure, absolutely. Certainly with TiVo and a lot of other time shift platforms out there, what we do is, since we're a social network, we want all of your friends to know that you're going to be on television. So while we can put you on TV in approximately 3 minutes, you can also answer questions that will come up from tomorrow's episode. So what we do is we notify you that you are going to be on a social network. We integrate. You can tweet your friends, for example, Facebook wall, certainly, and then we provide you an air check. It's actually recorded from our broadcast. So if you didn't happen to see it on television, you can share it with all your friends and say, I was on TV.
Oh, that's great, because I can remember back in the old days when you would call into the radio station and they would tell you they were going to play your song, and then you had to listen for 30 hours and see if they mentioned you. So that's great. And then also tell people that that's actually going to happen. So.
Yeah. So we notify you ahead of time, and we notify you a couple of times, and then, of course, we provide you with proof, if you will, of your 15 seconds of fame.
Okay. I want to take you back in time a little bit. I did a product back in the mid-'90s, and we were taking public record information, and we were putting it up on the internet. So it was kind of an interesting taking a mainframe application and allowing people to search their own public record information. And so what we expected is that people would come and use it, and they would look up, potentially new hires or things like that. But what most people did, their behavior was that they actually looked themselves up first. So I guess it could have been a precursor to something like LifeLock. Is there any information out there that I don't know about that I should? So it was the use of the product that we sort of didn't expect. And I know that you were with GodTube.
Yes. And
so that was one of your launches just before this. And how were you surprised with how people used, or something that happened with that launch?
I was really fortunate to be the founder of GodTube and former CEO. I think what really kind of shocked us was really the adoption. It was really the conversation that was going on in the comment section. believe it or not. We did a bunch of surveys and studies and found out that while people were actually watching the video once or twice, they would come back multiple times to join in that social conversation, and the only way that they could do it was in the comment section. And from that, a lot of dialogue came out. Naturally, it was a religious play. So people had questions, people had answers, and people were challenging each other, certainly right there. Of course, we opened up chat forums and everything else to enable that, but it was a conversation that was sparked based around the video content, which I think is the basis for social television today.
Yeah, very good. And then, so same question, but talking about your more near-term experience with Youtoo. So what's been something that sort of surprised you about it?
Well, certainly so far the adoption rate. We are in 15 million households currently. We expect to double that very soon. But naturally, it's a small portion of the population. So right now, we're putting about 200 people on television a day, give or take. In our first 3 weeks, we put over 12,000 people on TV.
Wow.
So if you think about it, there are some 300 television shows out there that are reality-based, and we've put more people on television than all 300 reality shows already in our first 3 weeks of launch. That and the inquiries, certainly from the television networks and content creators, as you might imagine.
Right.
All of a sudden, we can insert the viewer from home, and that's a pretty big disruptive technology in television. So we've been very surprised at other networks and the content creators that have kind of come forth and aligned with us to say, wait a minute, this is a social TV product that we can actually see using and monetizing, which is a big difference.
Okay, good. And if you think about customer engagement, so that's sort of one thing that we talked a lot about today. So how do we know who's using the product, how they're working with it, and I mean even how or what kind of advertising works in your space? I guess if you think about customer engagement, so what are your thoughts on that as it relates to the Youtoo product?
The demographics of who's going to watch the channel and who are going to use the social network is unknown. I mean, quite frankly, we have gone and looked at a number of studies. We've done research, and it tells us the average age is approximately 31 years old. However, this isn't the insurance business, 200 years of statistical data, right? So the truth of the matter is, we believe we know who it is, but because we have that engagement and feedback loop, we're going to be able to tell faster and more accurately than, say, Nielsen, for example, what shows are and aren't working. So for us, it's a fail-fast engagement.
Yeah, because I guess your group is most of the people using your product are using social media in some ways that they're expected or used to getting feedback that way. So it's a good feedback loop where in some cases people may not be using social media to watch certain content.
Right, precisely. That's part of it, and certainly, are people participating? I mean, that's for us one of the keys. Whatever the overall number of uploads, how many people have actually participated in the show? And I tell you what, they let you know whether they like it or not. We found that out in a very good way.
Right.
But it's something that's new, and we're going to find out.
Okay. So if you lean forward, because we've talked a little bit about that, right? You look back at what you've done and where you've been, but leaning forward and thinking about Youtoo, what does it sort of look like in a year?
Well, certainly we're a long-term licensing play. We can provide our social TV services to any network around the world, frankly. So what you're going to see in Season 2, think of Youtoo TV as an incubator, right? So what you're going to see is some pretty big name producers come out with shows, for example, like a Jeopardy. I'm just going to use this in an example. So today we watch Jeopardy, and we either play along in our head or with our friends or family in the room, and that's kind of the social aspect of it.
Right.
When the television program is over, we all tune in, at 5 o'clock the next day to watch it, and the game goes on. So if you were to enter YouTube technology into that, call it an engagement loop, if you will, it looks something like this. Not only could you watch the show, but you can also participate in the actual game show itself. So you could be, for example, you could be competing against everyone who is watching, or the contestants themselves. We'll be offering real cash and prizes as incentives, naturally as game shows do. And let's say, for example, you win from home, we can elevate you to TV right then and there, put you on TV. So when the television program is over, for example, that's kind of where we really shine. We see parallel games that continue. So, for example, the Jeopardy game would continue with all the gamification principles that we're all aware of, leaderboards, rewards, and in this case, of course, prizes. And then before the linear broadcast starts the next day, we'll elevate some of the winners, from the offline game, to television. You also, for example, think of a singing competition, for example, that you could compete from your home every week, right? Think of popular reality television shows where you could actually be a contestant from your home.
Yeah, because I know when you watch things like, Mark Burnett with Survivor, they're always showing the reels of the people who sent in their, trying to audition to be on Survivor, and it sort of seems to elevate that to a completely different way of submitting. Even potentially participating without necessarily going through that whole process.
Right. What it really does is give the content creators and the networks a whole toolkit or palette of new tools to create different types of programming. What's fun for us is to see how other people are actually using this in ways we never thought.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's the thing that is fun, right? You put something out there from a technology perspective, and we like to talk about how people look at what people did. So what did they do? What did they do? But what is it they're going to do? Where are they going to go with this? What's that new technology going to be? Is there any technology component or thing that you sort of wish was out there that would help with the implementation of Youtoo? Could you think of something like an iPad or something else that would be nice to have?
Well, in terms of technology, we're really platform agnostic. Whether you integrate this into a linear broadcast or if you were to integrate it into Hulu, for example. Certainly with proliferation of iPads, it will give us more opportunities, if you will, for people to be on television and different ways to use that. I think in social television, until there is a standardized app, I don't think that you're going to see really a widespread adoption, of other services. So that's what I'd really like to see. And I know there are a number of different competing companies and product manufacturers that are trying to get into that market, but I think it's going to be a few years out.
Yeah. So, and thinking about that, if you've got advertising, so the advertising play, so how does that work in your world? What does that look like? I mean, is it the same kind of model, or is it different?
One of the fun things certainly is monetization. I think you see a lot of social TV companies out there with great ideas, great business plans, but the bottom line is how you're going to make money on it, not only for yourself, but how are advertisers going to be able to measure success. So one of the things that we've seen 3 weeks into the launch here is we have a Helzberg Diamonds, for example. They're one of the larger retailers in the United States of engagement rings, for example. So in their case, what they want to do is they really want people using their products to create commercials around them. So anniversary moments, for example. As you can imagine, the big one is proposing. So, you'll see contest here very soon where you have 20 seconds to propose on television, and then of course we've tagged it, this proposal and thousands of others brought to you by Holtzclaw Diamonds. So it's a really great way for advertisers to get into social media content in a way that they really understand it and can measure success.
Okay. And what we found with some of our core personas, we have some personas who don't really like television.
Sure.
So there's a couple. One's called Showless Joe, and Keeping Up Carl, who uses television primarily for friends and family. But when sports happens, especially here in the South, because we really like our football, when football happens, they become this persona we call Singular Sam, who watches football every time it's on. He likes to kind of talk with his friends about what's going on on the football stage or whatever. How are sports and other things, how do those play into what you're doing, or do they? And they're not?
Well, as an incubator, naturally, we're going to be coming out with different types of programs. Sports is certainly one of our sweet spots. So if you can imagine an ESPN, for example, doing a sports center where you at home could participate, I mean, you could imagine, the potential ratings for a show like that. So we see sports, we see politics, for example, also playing a big role. Think of the Sunday morning talk shows, for example. If there was a feedback segment, how many people would want to get their 2 cents on television? So it really plays into that persona that you're talking about. Certainly, I don't know if this is the correct vernacular, but the chatty Cathy that you mentioned in USA Today, certainly different persona we certainly see using, if there are men you consider chatty Cathy.
I'm a chatty Cathy.
Okay, good. I'm down here. I want to make sure I get back to the other. So it certainly lends itself to that persona as well.
Yeah, we definitely see those people. We've got a couple of our Twitter MCs, which are over in the other room, and I think that this platform is going to be great for people like us who sort of like that self-promotion and social media allows. For the person who's sort of the diehard just TV fan, they like to watch television and they care about the characters and that type of thing. Do you have any plans with this around that kind of concept?
So scripted television is it's a tough one. This really lends itself to events such as sporting events, reality shows, game shows, and that's the fun of it. We've toyed around with a couple of scripted ideas, but that's pretty tough to do, producing on the fly. So, one of the things that we've noticed is, as a former network producer myself, reality television, even when I was in it in the very infancy, we were kind of like the dog with fleas in the room, if you will. Nobody wanted to talk to us. Now look at it, right?
Exactly.
So I think the explosion of people being on television has been validated by that. But for those people who don't like sporting events, reality shows, or game shows, I'm going to leave that up to the content creators that are better at it than us to figure out how to integrate that into their programming.
Yeah, because I think as you talked about the kind of X-Files concept, having David Duchovny ask one of the questions or something could be an interesting concept,
Yeah, absolutely. For us, season 1 is about really consumer awareness and adoption. Okay. So actually being on television, believe it or not, is a big concept.
Oh, yeah. I believe you.
It seems simple.
Right.
I can be on television from, almost anywhere, but then when you actually put it into practice, you feel like, wait a minute, from right here, my phone, I can be on TV. So in season 1, we just wanted to kind of really get people to understand you can be on national television and interact with the national audience, from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, okay, well, good. Well, I'm going to see if we've got any questions that have come in from the Twitter feed.
We have a lot. So where do I start? I'm going to start with Crystal Lorraine. She's one of our Twitter MCs. Love Crystal, Krystelle. Follow her. She's awesome. She wanted to know, this concept of social media producers that's been going around. Do you see networks adopting that position? And if so, have you yourself adopted that position within Youtoo?
You know, I can certainly speak for Hollywood. You know, what's very unique about Hollywood is there's an actual war going on, and it has been between Hollywood and Silicon Valley. So I really don't see any networks adopting that, quite frankly. I see experiments going on. But what you really have to keep in mind is the creative process, actually creating the content and being in that content stream, is something that's highly protected. And unlike the RIAA, which Hillary Rosen made a horrible mistake in my case, the television industry is approaching it from an entirely different angle. So they're not really open to that type of unknown or untrusted resource to be able to be on television. It takes quite a bit to be able to do that. So, and for example, that's why we had to buy the television networks. So going up to an ESPN or a Bravo and saying, hey, by the way, can we turn around and deconstruct your back end and reconstruct it? It wasn't even a conversation. So if anybody's going to do it, we are. And I think people are going to see formats and producers that naturally might not ever be on television be able to have the opportunity to do so on Youtoo.
How do you know? I think it's interesting that Silicon Valley and Hollywood, you're just down the street from each other. That's a really bad thing, right? It sounds like the thing for a movie of some sort.
Well, it's interesting because when I left television in kind of the mid-'90s there. I came back in 2000 and did a lot of work, and you'd be surprised how many executives did not have a computer on their desk in 2000. So it's
just fine.
Yeah, it's inherent, and certainly when you talk about technology impacting their content. I mean, as we all know, content is actually king.
Right.
That's a problem. Yeah. So I don't see that happening for some time.
So a follow-up question from her: how are you marketing the platform? And how do you plan on determining success since you're a startup?
Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that. Certainly, we're in 15 million households now. You may have just seen the launch. We do something that's very unique. And we use public relations, what we call earned media, if you will, as opposed to paid media. And we find out that that's actually a lot more effective. And in total, I think online, 40 million people became aware of Youtoo. Certainly, we have the metrics from the television appearances in a television broadcast, but the print, is naturally very hard to say how many people actually saw us in USA Today. So that type of coverage is something that it's very difficult to buy. So you're going to continue to see us on what we call a Rolling Thunder campaign, come out with new features and stunts about every month to keep ourselves in the public eye.
Do you foresee that you'll eventually have the volume that YouTube has in uploading videos?
YouTube is a great company, and Google is a great company. I really can't see us ever competing with them. We're putting people on television. Right now, it's a 15-second in what we call a fame spot. We can vary time if we want. So I really don't. In fact, we don't want to become a video file sharing service, much like a GodTube was. We've restricted our IP address currently to the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. So someone outside of the country won't be able to participate. So. At least for now, that is, until we license it overseas. So we license it overseas.
Well, there's an if in there somewhere.
That's a natural progression. But currently, right now, we're focused solely on the U.S. and not on competing with YouTube.
So a question from the Watch2 platform. Tell me a little bit more about this 15-second fame spot. What if someone becomes popular? Could that fame spot become longer?
That's a very good question. We just started with the initial product, which is the fame spot. Yeah, absolutely. We see sourcing, future hosts. We see opening that 15 seconds up at some point to allow people, to be on television for longer. Certainly. So what we've really done is, two things, is we've really elevated that popular web programming to television. And I think we've done more of it in our network than any other that I'm aware of, this being 3 weeks into it. So, we see elevating a lot of web properties, and then certainly using some of the very popular web hosts out there and putting them in their own shows. So the web is a wonderful resource. I think that's underutilized in television today.
So the follow-up question, I see this becoming amazingly popular. What if it's too popular? Would you go to multiple channels? Because I don't want to wait 5 months to see my YouTube air.
So we're a licensing platform. What that means is, as Youtoo grows, certainly we see other networks adopting it, and you're going to hear some announcements made very shortly about other major networks and local broadcasters that are using it. So we do see migrating off of our cable platform very soon. For us, I think there was a question in the last panel, can you make social TV programming that's local? And, it's also a question that came up at the first social TV conference in California a couple of months ago. It's how do we take, syndicated programming and make it into social television or make it interactive, and how can we also localize that? Because in the cable business, localization is everything. So for us, we can do both. Naturally, we've already proven that we can take a show like The X-Files, and breathe new life into it. Conversely, we do believe at one point there are going to be more people that want to be on television than we have shelf space or time. So certainly for us, a local channel here in Atlanta or in any other DMA or major market, we see launching Youtoo local. So certainly you could be on the national feed or you could be on the local feed. And that's really one of the next evolution is the localization.
Another question just came in. How will the content providers monetize this? Is this an extension of their product? Is it more eyeballs on their product, or are they charging for access to be on YouTube?
Well, so we're designed as a monetization layer. If you take a look today at the social media landscape, networks are using third parties such as Twitter and Facebook to get their message out. As we all know, there's no metrics out there that can actually assign a value to that. I certainly think that's going to be coming, in the future. So the question is, how do we make money? We act as a middle layer, if you will. If you have to go to Youtoo, for example, and register to download the app to be part of the show, then they become a joint user with a network and ourselves. So it gives a network a direct connection with and information that they wouldn't be able to get, and monetization opportunities far beyond something that you cannot monetize on Facebook or you cannot monetize on Twitter. And that's really the key to what we do, is drive revenues. So for some networks it will be an extension of their advertising. In TV we're always looking for advertising real estate. And that's what this provides. In addition to that, you're going to see paid options on the site. The social network A little different than social networks here in the U.S., pattern actor social networks over in Asia, in Europe, that are 3 to 5 years more advanced in terms of feature set and monetization. So we've built a virtual economy that you're going to see us continue to roll out. So there are going to be certain products that we will charge, a micro-charge, $1 for, $1.50 for, and other features that you're going to see enabled. For example, let me give you a real good example. Let's say you're approved and you're going to be on air, and we know that you're going to be, or you know that you're going to be in the show. You're going to be one of 30 people that we put on that hour. The question is, when am I going to be on? So naturally in television, if you take a look at advertising, the advertising rates are higher at the front of the show as opposed to the end of the show.
That's because show is asleep.
Absolutely. Asleep. So, the option to have the first fame spot has a value to it, for example. So you're going to see kind of, those types of features and feature sets which are direct monetization as well.
So this is from Kathy Iconis, one of our Twitter MCs, and she asked, the question is Youtoo offered nationwide? But I think what she really wants to know is it in Atlanta, because she wants to be on.
She's already got like CPA TV on her.
Yes, certainly we are on here in Atlanta. We're on Cox Systems. Certainly go to youtoo.com. It's youtoo.com. There's a channel finder just like any other cable network. We're in every major market except for Chicago, which that'll be changing very soon. So go to youtoo.com and find your local listing and look us up, and then be on TV.
Another question on the typical users. Who are the typical users? Are they younger generation, early adopters? Are they power users? Particular persona? Eric, you might want to chime in after Chris answers that first part.
Well, certainly so far, we put about 12,000 people on television. This year, we'll do about a minimum of 150,000 people. So far, what we've seen is really what our studies have suggested, that it's going to be 20-something, 30-something, culminating around 31 years old. It's kind of that Discovery Channel demographic, if you will. Disposable income enough, certainly, to be able to have a mobile device with a camera on it. However, with that said, we've also seen social TV experiments that have gone on outside of the country. In one case, there was a citizen journalism show over in Europe, and they targeted it towards the